California, the chair of the Environmental Committee, is by my side. We're also very proud today to be joined by Bill McKibben, one of the leaders of the 350 organization, Mike Brune, the executive director of Sierra Club, Tara McGinnis, the executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, Tyson Slocum, the energy program director of Public Citizen, and Meg Power of the National Community Action Foundation. Let me begin by saying that I fear very much, and I say this as the father of 4 and the grandchildren of 7, and the grandfather of 7, that our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are going to look back on this period in history and ask a very simple question. Where were they? Why didn't the United States of America, the most powerful nation on earth, lead the international community in cutting greenhouse gas emissions and preventing the devastating damage that the scientific community was sure would come? Where were they? Let me be very clear. The issue that we are dealing with today, and this is something my fellow Vermonter Bill McKibben makes all of the time, that what we are dealing with today is not political. It has nothing to do with Democrats. It has nothing to do with Republicans or independents, and it has nothing to do with the political squabbling that we see here every day on Capitol Hill. What we are dealing with today is physics. The leading scientists in the world who study climate change now tell us that the projections that they made in recent years was wrong. They underestimated the crisis facing our planet, and the damage they foresee for the future is much more serious than they had previously estimated. They now tell us that if we continue along our path, where 12 out of the last 15 years were the warmest on record, and take no decisive action in transforming our energy system and cutting greenhouse gas emissions, this planet could be at least 8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than is currently the case. And what would that mean to the planet? What would a warming of 8 degrees Fahrenheit or more mean to the planet? It would mean sea levels rising by 3 to 6 feet, which would flood great American cities like New Orleans, Boston, or Miami, making them uninhabitable. And this would be true for coastal communities all over the world. It would mean that every year we would see more and more extreme weather disturbances, like Hurricanes Irene and Sandy, costing taxpayers collectively hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions, to rebuild those communities. And it would bring devastating harm to our economy and our productive capabilities. We would see the price of food escalating because crops in the United States and around the world would be unable to grow in temperatures substantially higher than they are right now. It would mean greater threats of war and international instability as countries and people all over the world fight for limited resources like water and arable land. It would mean, in terms of disease, more unnecessary deaths. The legislation that Senator Boxer and I are introducing today, with the support of the leading environmental organizations in this country, actually addresses the crisis and does what needs to be done to protect the planet. That's our goal. I know media will ask me, well, how many Republicans do you have? We'll worry about that later. What this bill does is address the crisis. It can reverse greenhouse gas emissions in a very significant way. It can create millions of jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel and into energy efficiency and such sustainable energies as wind, solar, geothermal, and biomass. A major focus of this legislation is a price on carbon and methane emissions. This fee on the largest fossil fuel polluters affects less than 3,000 entities nationwide, but covers 85% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, according to the Congressional Research Service. This legislation ends the fossil fuel subsidies and protects communities by requiring that fracking operations comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act and disclose the chemicals they use. To protect families from fossil fuel companies jacking up prices, 60% of the carbon fee revenue will be rebated per capita to every legal U.S. resident. To protect U.S. manufacturers, this legislation includes a border fee on imported fuels and products unless the nation shipping them already has their own similar carbon price. That ensures a level playing field for U.S. businesses while creating an incentive for international cooperation. To transform our energy system, this legislation makes the boldest ever investment in energy efficiency and sustainable energy. That includes weatherizing 1 million homes a year, as President Obama called for previously. It means tripling the budget for ARPA-E to do advanced research and investing hundreds of billions through incentives and a public-private sustainable technologies fund focusing on energy efficiency, solar, wind, geothermal, and biomass, and clean transportation technology. We also provide funds to train workers for jobs in the sustainable energy economy. We provide funds to help communities become resilient in the face of extreme weather, and we pay down the debt by roughly $300 billion over 10 years. We have, in conclusion, the opportunity right now with the President's commitment in the State of the Union to make major progress. The President can and must use his authority to cut down on power plant pollution and reject the dangerous Keystone XL project. But he cannot give up on a comprehensive legislation solution, and neither can we, and that is what Senator Boxer and I are offering. Thank you. Thank you. Senator Barbara Boxer.
I'm very proud to be here with my colleague and friend, Senator Sanders, and I'm excited about this bill. Yesterday in this room, we had a briefing led by 4 distinguished climate experts, and what they told us was shocking. They used expressions like this: if we do nothing, game over. Bernie pressed on specifics. They said certain cities that we know will be gone. States in the coastal regions will not look anything the way they look today. If that wasn't an alarm bell, you know, there isn't any. Now, the 4 top scientists and many others tell us that the Earth is headed toward a planetary emergency. Now, some may close their eyes to it. Some of you in this room can close your eyes to it, although I doubt you will, because that's why you're in this room. You're not closing your eyes to it. Well, we won't close our eyes to it, and we're not closing our eyes to it. And I want to, at this point, give a shout out to my great state of California. Yes, the largest state in the union, taking the lead on this, doing the right thing on this, creating jobs because of what they're doing. And we here have got to follow that lead. Now, some say wait for China. Let me show you a picture, 2 pictures of this. Here's some recent pictures taken. This is what it looks like. Are we going to wait for China to take the lead when their people can't breathe and you can't see anything? I was there a little over a year ago, and you couldn't see. So we're not waiting. We can't wait. We have to lead. And when we lead, it matters. I want to thank Senator Sanders. Thank you to my staff. I want to thank Senator Sanders for crafting a very straightforward and smart bill. The thing I've learned about Bernie, working with him over the years, is that, you know, when you speak with him, it's straight from the shoulder talk. There's no, dancing around. And this bill reflects that. And that's why I like it. It's clear, it's simple to understand, and it's a good, good bill. We know the cause of our trouble. There's no mystery. This isn't trying to find what's causing some dreaded disease and it takes forever to figure it out. We know what's causing the problem. Too much carbon pollution in the air. That's causing the problem. And I think one of our speakers yesterday suggested rather than say climate change, we should say climate disruption. So I'm going to talk about this issue as climate disruption. Now, I also want to give a bit of good news about the power of EPA. And I have a chart that shows you the various sectors that produce greenhouse gas emissions. So electricity sector produces 34%, transportation 27%, industrial 20%. Now, those three sectors right now can be regulated in terms of the emissions by the EPA. We wasted 4 years under George W. Bush because he fought and said, no, 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 no. EPA does not have the power to go after greenhouse gas emissions. But thank God this court ruled in our favor. It was as clear as it could be. I'm not a lawyer. All you do is read the Clean Air Act, and it said straightforwardly that greenhouse gas emissions are covered. But it had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So this is the good news. They can act. But given the extent of the crisis, it's not enough. That's why I'm working on the residential commercial building sector and have some bills on that. But we need to go further. We need to go further. Thank you very much, Joe. And what our bill does, it puts a fee on that carbon pollution at its source. And what I love about this bill, it also matches that fee with a fee on imports that have also added to carbon pollution so as not to disadvantage our business people. And the proceeds go for very important priorities, as Senator Sanders has said. Energy rebates, very key. Infrastructure, which I pushed hard for because I think it's critical that we build our infrastructure and build it in an efficient way. And clean energy. The proceeds will create jobs, many jobs, and the rest of the proceeds will reduce the deficit. So the Sanders-Boxer bill reduces carbon pollution and climate disruption while creating jobs and reducing the deficit. If ever there was a win-win-win, this bill is a win-win-win. And if you add this to the positive steps the EPA can take under the Clean Air Act, then the American people will see that we are serious. And we are not waiting for China, who could care less about the pollution their people breathe. We're not waiting for any other country. We, the greatest nation on earth, will take the leadership. So what an honor it is for me to be part of this. Thank you very much, Bernie.
Thank you, Barbara Boxer, Chair of the Senate Environmental Committee. It gives me a great deal of pleasure now to introduce a man who has not only over the last number of decades been one of the most prescient thinkers on the issue of climate change, but also in terms of his work and leadership at 350.org, one of the important international organizers in opposition to global warming. Please welcome Bill McKibben.
Thank you, Senator Sanders and Senator Boxer, for inviting me, but also for this bill. I think it's no accident that the states of California, which has been leading on climate change, and Vermont, which has more green jobs per capita than any state in the union, understand the opportunities, not just the challenges, but the opportunities represented by this transition. This has been an important week in Washington. One of the most important weeks in the 25-year history of this climate fight. Important because the President was talking about it in his State of the Union. Important because people from all over the country are pouring into this city to demand action. 50 of us leaders, including Michael Brune, were arrested yesterday outside the White House trying to send a message we need to stop this dangerous Keystone project. There'll be tens of thousands on the Mall on Sunday in the largest climate demonstration in this country's history. But it's also really important because of this piece of legislation, which really does set a benchmark for where we need to go. It establishes really important things, including the premise that if the sky belongs to anybody, it belongs to us and not the fossil fuel industry. The basic structural problem that's powered climate change is that alone among industries, fossil fuel industry can pour its waste into the atmosphere for free. And that would end with this bill, and with that end, we would begin to see substantial and real change taking place. I think a lot of people wonder, maybe still wonder, whether our political system is up to this task. For a quarter century, it has done very little, but we're now at the point where there is no abstraction or theory about this problem. 2012 was the warmest year that the United States has ever seen by a full degree. We had a horrific drought. We watched the Arctic melt, and at the end of the year, we watched the Atlantic pour into the New York City subway system, demonstrating to anyone the fragility of our civilization. That's why it is so powerful to see this legislation being introduced at this time, and to see so many Americans pouring into Washington to demand just this kind of action.
Thanks very much. Now I'd like to introduce Bill's fellow jailbird, Mike Brune, who's the executive director of the Sierra Club. Mike.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Senators Sanders and Boxer for their leadership, not just in introducing this bill, but their tireless perseverance over the last couple decades on this issue. The Sierra Club is proud to support this bill. We recognize that it will put a fee on carbon, and it will help to stimulate clean energy development. It will do what science requires and reduce greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as we can. It will create 350,000 new jobs and sustain at least 100,000 more. It will help to weatherize 1 million homes per year, which will act like a tax cut and help consumers to save money all across the country. So we regard this as a thoughtful, principled, and very timely action. I want to introduce someone here today. My parents are here in the front row. Robert and Patricia Brune. My father and mom raised my brothers and sisters on the Jersey Shore, Chadwick Beach, New Jersey. My dad built our house with my uncle. And when Superstorm Sandy hit a few months or so ago, our house was flooded. First floor had to be gutted. My parents haven't been able to move back for 4 months. And so what we saw in New Jersey is the same thing that we're seeing in Texas, the same thing that we're seeing in communities around the world, where climate change, which for many people used to be this abstract, distant concept, was brought to our doorstep. I also want to introduce my wife, Mary, and our 3 little cuties in the back row there. Genevieve, who is clearly outspoken, my daughter Olivia, and Sebastian over there. And I wanted to talk to them because they're hearing some scary things. Some scary things about our future. And also, I wanted to introduce some optimism into this conversation, because where a lot of people have very eloquently talked about the moral obligation that we have as a society to address climate change, we don't often talk about the economic opportunity that's inherent in a clean energy transition. So Sebastian and Olivia and Genevieve, they're lucky because they're going to grow up in the first society that's powered by energy that's safe and secure and sustainable. By the time that these guys are my age, half of our power, more than half of our power, will be coming from clean energy. It's a great time to be alive. They'll be at the rally on Sunday. I expect everybody else will be there. And Genevieve, I'll see you in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Mike. Tara McGinnis is the Executive Director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tara?
Thank you very much, and I'll be very brief. I want to really thank Senators Sanders and Boxer for helping us focus on what really matters. Our moral obligation, both to Michael's kids and to the other kids in the room and across the country, to make sure that we have a country and a planet that is not damaged and polluted. It's very simple. It's easy to be distracted, and many of the things that we're reading and writing and hearing focus us in on the political squabbling, but it shouldn't distract us from the task at hand. While I'm sure we'll take questions about counting votes and who's on what side, individuals like the Bruins are already taking actions today, someplace outside this room, to repair their homes and communities, from Sandy to plan for the damages that will come. Over the past few months, we've seen tremendously the impact, not that this is going to have on generations to come, but the impact on the lives of individuals. These are moms and dads, small business owners, city mayors who are today, while we are here organizing, thinking about how they put their lives back together. Time is very limited. This legislation attacks at the center the most catastrophic effects of climate change by going directly to its greatest source, carbon pollution, and at the same time puts us ahead in investing in our future. This is not a new idea. When I was coming over here this morning, I started to read clips from 10 years ago. Just around the block, there was another press conference held by some of the same folks here and some other folks on the Hill, Democrats and Republicans. A bill 10 years ago, right around the time when the Center for American Progress was getting started, that focused us in. I'm going to read one line from an op-ed that was written just 10 years ago. The bottom line is that the potential economic rewards of confronting climate change outweigh the risks, and realizing these rewards would be the key to American industry reclaiming its global competitive advantage. Those words, though they could have been written by either of these senators, were written by John McCain in an op-ed to support the bill 10 years ago. But I want to say, picking up what Michael mentioned on the prospect and promise of today, that there are many things moving in the right direction. People are focusing on what matters. A majority of Americans support the idea of addressing climate change. That has to count for something. The president anchored his inaugural address and his State of the Union in a call to action, not only talking about what Congress needs to do, but what federal agencies are planning to do right away. Republicans and Democrats, unlike on other issues that are on the table, have previously worked together on this and even voted on the issue of addressing climate change. It is possible that we can make progress if we focus, as we have done today, on what really matters. I want to thank the senators and throw the support of the Center for American Progress behind this bill.
Tyson Slocum is the Energy Program Director with Public Citizen. Tyson?
Thank you so much. On behalf of Public Citizens, more than 300,000 members and supporters across the country, I want to sincerely thank Senators Sanders and Senator Boxer for their bold leadership on putting forth this legislation to address climate change. Public Citizens members have been demanding that we take action on climate change, and because we represent one of America's largest consumer advocacy groups, our duty is also to protect working families. And I'm proud to say that this legislation accomplishes both goals. By assigning a price on carbon, the legislation is able to adequately put a price on our fossil fuel addiction. And by dedicating 60% of those revenues to send directly back to working families, it's able to protect households. We've been saying for years at Public Citizen that American families want to take action on climate change, but they don't always have the resources to make their homes more energy efficient. They can't afford to install solar panels on their home. They don't have access to good mass transit solutions in their communities. I'm proud to say this legislation does a lot of those things to help give the tools that working families need to address climate change by providing tens of billions of dollars in financing for weatherization assistance and for community assistance on funding sustainable energy solutions. Public Citizen is proud to endorse this legislation and to follow the bold leadership that Senator Sanders and Senator Boxer have set forth today, and we're happy to stand with the other organizations in supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyson. Last but certainly not least is Meg Power, who's representing the National Community Action Foundation. Meg?
National Community Action Foundation represents the nation's about 1,000 community action agencies. These are low-income programs at every community, and most of them deliver low-income home energy assistance, the weatherization program, and they just finished 1 million units, so it's obvious we can do it. And they also advocate in front of state utility regulatory commissions and legislatures on behalf of the low-income customers. 5 years ago, we set out with Public Citizen and National Consumer Law Center and Friends of the Earth to set down what the principles are for a climate bill that's fair. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be hard, so what's fair? What includes the most vulnerable citizens? What protects them? Our agencies at the time in Biloxi and New Orleans, and I told you we have them everywhere, in Pat Christian, now in New York, have been asking tough questions. What are you doing for us? This is the right way. This is the principled way. As Tyson said, it puts money back in everybody's pocket and in a progressive pattern. It addresses the community mitigation and protection. It is fair to every one of the citizens in this country. We're all vulnerable citizens. It is particularly fair to the most vulnerable and inclusive, and it's smart. The only thing was my members, when they've heard about this press conference over the last few days, went, sure, of course it's Senator Boxer and Senator Sanders. We're used to their leadership and creativity and their guts, and we're so grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Meg. Any questions? Anyone may have? Sir, you are with whom? I'm sorry, Zach Coleman with the Hill. Yeah.
And I wanted to know, pressing ahead on the legislative front, is there any plan for committee votes? And there are.
Let me introduce the chairman of the committee.
Well, my plan at this point is the first bill we're going to do is the Water Resources Development Act, which, by the way, has a whole section on extreme weather events in terms of mitigation. Then, when that is done, we're going to go in earnest to this topic and to this bill. Now, let me say, what Senator Sanders and I are going to do between now and then, which would be early spring, I'd say, is to get as many co-sponsors as we can. I intend to mark up this bill and to get this bill to the floor. I would say, without really conferring with staff on this, but I think I'm looking around summertime might be a good time to bring this bill forward to the floor. But that's my intention, and I expect that we will get a good bill out of this committee. This is a great committee, and you're sitting in the room where we passed the Clean Air Act. And by the way, I wasn't there then, but it took more than 10 years to pass the Clean Air Act. And that Clean Air Act, as I showed you when I showed you that chart, set forward a path for EPA to control greenhouse gas emissions, which was just a little bit on the table, but thank goodness they recognized it there. So this is a room in which we've passed the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and yes, we did vote out of this committee a great bill on climate, and when it came to the floor, it did get a majority, but it didn't get enough. So we're going to keep on doing this, and we don't give up, and we won't give up, because you could pull the covers over your head and say, this isn't happening, but Mother Nature is proving it to us constantly that it is happening. Yeah.
Matt Laszlo, public radio reporter. A lot of Republicans are upset with what the president said in the State of the Union, that he's going to take strong executive action on climate change. You've talked about how with Republicans controlling the House, you think the EPA and other agencies, that's kind of the best way to combat this right now. What's your response to the president?
I have a very easy response. We passed the Clean Air Act. It is the law of the land. Laws are to be obeyed. And the executive, in my view, has no option but to carry out the law. If they don't, these folks here are going to take him to court, which they've done in the past in many other issues, and won a lot of these cases. So when they say, they fold their hands like this and say, well, he's going to do it, you know, under the Clean Air Act or whatever, yeah, they can't overturn it. They tried to. We stood sentry the last few years, and we stopped them from turning back the clock. They tried to pass legislatively a law that said that greenhouse gas emissions were not covered under the Clean Air Act, and we beat them back. And we've beat them back continually. So if they don't like the Clean Air Act, there's only one thing they can do, and that's try to overturn it. And let me send, you know, a very strong signal. That isn't happening. If you ask any American, do they want clean air, clean water, they say yes. I have not met an American who came up to me and said, Senator, I really wish my water was dirtier and filthier and my air was, you know, it's too clean. So good luck to them. But for them to be upset about the fact that the president is carrying out the law, it's their problem.
And let me just add to that. The issue is not that some Republicans are worried that the president is going to do the right thing. The real question that the American people are asking is how we can have a majority of Republicans in this country who refuse to even recognize the reality of climate change, let alone support strong action to move us forward. That is the question that the American people are asking, not whether the government is going to support the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. Sir?
Andrew Restuccia with Politico. Thanks. Have you talked to Senator Reid about, and is he supportive of bringing the bill to the floor? And have you talked to the White House, and do they endorse the bill?
Well, I have over the years talked to Senator Reid, as has Senator Boxer, on this issue. In general, he is sympathetic, and we'll see how he and other leaders come down in the months to come. I think, frankly, and I say this to the organizations behind us, the United States Congress is way behind where the American people are on this issue. And we're going to win this fight when millions of people stand up and say, you have got to do something for my kids and grandchildren and for my business. You cannot ignore this planetary crisis. And when millions of people stand up and say that, you know what, we're going to have a heck of a lot of support here in Congress from both parties.
That's right. And I would just say to your specific question, how a bill becomes a law. I mean, it is a bit, don't listen to what you learn in school, because it's a lot more difficult than they make it sound. But the first step for us is to write the bill. And we were putting finishing touches. It's Bernie's bill, and I had some thoughts, and he incorporated them, which I was grateful for. And now that bill is ready. It's ready to be introduced. We introduce it. After we introduce it, we get people to co-sponsor, and we are going to enlist the support of all these organizations, not only that are here today, but all over the country, and the mayors and the rest, to get co-sponsors. Look, this is a gold standard bill. Every once in a while we have one. The last one was the Kerry bill. That was gold standard. This is the gold standard. And once we get our co-sponsors, and we have our hearings, and we vote it out of committee, that's the time you talk about bringing it to the floor. But I want to underscore what Senator Sanders said, and then I have to go because I have an important meeting with the NRC chairman, so I have to go. But just let me say this. The people are the ones who are in control of what happens. And that's a great thing, because they are so far ahead of us. They know what they're seeing. No big oil company can sit down in their living room and tell them Superstorm Sandy didn't happen, or droughts didn't happen, or these fires and the bark beetle and all the other things they see happening in front of their eyes. So once we get the co-sponsors and we have the hearing and we get the bill marked up and it comes out of this committee, that's the time to discuss when it goes to the floor And all of this plays in front of the backdrop of what we have here today. These fabulous representatives of I consider mainstream environmental organizations, they're here as individuals. They represent millions of people in this country. And we're going to have to do this. And you know, the one thing about Bernie Sanders and Barbara Boxer and Barack Obama is we like to organize. And we think the community is the key. So here we are. We've been beat down, we got up, we fought back, we're still on this, and we're re-energized, and that's a good word, re-energized with clean energy, and we're ready to go. And thank you very much. Thank you.
How would you respond to the inevitable criticism that's going to come up of the effect a carbon fee is going to have on the price of natural gas or the price of ultimately gasoline?
First of all, we are putting a huge amount of money in rebates to protect consumers. But second of all, the converse question has got to be asked. What happens to our entire economy if we do not, in a bold way, address climate change? How many jobs are we going to lose? How many hundreds of billions of dollars is the United States Congress going to have to spend in order to rebuild communities that are devastated? What will it mean to the price of food all over the world if we don't address the drought caused by global warming? So let me just repeat what is a simple fact. We are looking at the major planetary crisis facing this planet. When scientists tell us that the temperature of this Earth may go up at least 8 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century, that means cataclysmic changes to the planet. We have got to act. All right. Okay, listen, I want to thank all of the organizations for being here. In truth, the future of this legislation and how our country and the world respond is in your hands as much as it is in our hands. Thank you for all that you have done, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you all very much. All right.